This Sunday, Metro Atlanta healthcare workers demanding change.
We are not the enemy. We do this work because we want to serve you.
Police say a gunman targeted the CDC because of his alleged vendetta against the COVID-19 vaccine, killing a DeKalb police officer.
What politicians need to do, frankly, we need to listen to the people who are on the front line.
The newest candidate to enter the race for governor in Georgia goes on the record with Atlanta News First, as President Trump gives one Republican candidate his stamp of approval, and the federal government takes control of the police in Washington, D.C.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
And good Sunday morning. I'm Rick Folbaum. We're glad you're with us. And we begin this morning with politics and public health. The two collided a little over a week ago when police say a man armed with 5 guns targeted the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the country's signature public health agency. Patrick Joseph White of Kennesaw is said to have blamed the COVID-19 vaccine for making him depressed and suicidal. So police say he stole his father's guns, he drove to the CDC campus and fired almost 500 shots at the building and also at the responding police officer, DeKalb County Police Officer David Rose. Eventually, police say White turned the gun on himself. Now, public healthcare workers are blaming misinformation spread about the COVID-19 vaccine and are now demanding state legislators to do something.
We are not the enemy. We do this work because we want to serve you.
The more laws we actually have, or legislative priorities that we have to reduce firearm injury, will reduce these kind of incidences from happening in our state.
There's nothing that we advocate for that is to take away firearms. It's really treating gun violence as a public health crisis, as the #1 cause of death for children in our state. That is a health crisis.
Joining me now to discuss, Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon, Democratic political consultant Zelda Jackson, and former Cobb County GOP Chair Jason Shepard. Thank you to all of you for being here. Welcome to On the Record. And in the wake of terrible violence like this involving guns, we always hear from people who want to see stricter gun control. This story, of course, also involves the politics of public health. So, Jason, the suspected shooter's father apparently kept these weapons in a safe locked box, and they were taken by his son. What more could a responsible gun owner have done?
I don't think there is a single solution that we really could have had. I mean, truthfully, someone who is interested in doing harm is going to find a way. From my childhood as a young adult, I remember someone using fertilizer and rented a truck to destroy the federal building in Oklahoma City, and we all remember that. Yep. So we're looking for sort of that magic pill, pun intended, on this. And really, it's as much about mental health as it is about gun safety. That obviously this young man was having issues, he was having problems, and we do have a crisis in that. And we see that across the board in all these incidents, that there's always a mental health component that's not been addressed. And it's really what comes down to, how do we fix the problem? We're never going to truly fix it, because there's always going to be individuals who fall through the cracks.
Doug, we're a few months away from the legislative session kicking off, the new session. State lawmakers, how might they respond to this?
Well, we've seen in the past Democrats try to do things like safe storage bills, tax incentives for the purchase of safe storage equipment, things like gun safes, gun locks. It's really been a non-starter, though, for Republicans, although they've tried to make their own attempts to certainly increase gun safety to some degree. It's not as far as Democrats have ever, wanted to go. And so I would look again for these, the reintroduction of these safe storage bills and the tax incentives for the purchase of safe storage equipment from Democrats.
We spoke with Georgia U.S. Senator John Ossoff, who ran through what he called verbal attacks from the White House against the CDC. Take a listen.
The CDC has been under sustained political attack since this administration took power. They have now fired or tried to fire nearly a quarter of the CDC workforce. And the Secretary of Health and Human Services is a notorious crank who has embraced over the course of his career countless unfounded conspiracy theories about public health.
Zelda, it wasn't long ago that the CDC was not political in any way, shape, or form. No one viewed it that way. But of course, things have changed. What can lawmakers do about it?
The CDC is run by the government. So to say they're not political is like an oxymoron. They are political. What we need to do is reach back into figuring out how the CDC can help the environment, the community. And doing that, we have to reach back into the lawmakers and say, what's going on in our state? What's going on with our city? What's happening?
We've seen attempts in the legislature. We asked about what lawmakers can do at red flag laws, which again was kind of a non-starter for some of the people in the General Assembly. And so maybe this is an opportunity for them to revisit these types of laws that can come in and, you know, do exactly what the name says.
Well, there's also the other element, and that has to do with information, and really more specifically misinformation, because the truth of the matter is the COVID-19 vaccine helped to save millions of lives during the pandemic. You may not know that, though, depending on where you get your information. Atlanta News First investigative reporter Andy Parati has spent months looking into what happens when false information spreads too far.
I saw what a whole society being ravaged by measles will look like, and it's not pretty.
The measles death toll in Samoa is now 62.
A national emergency has been in place since last month, closing all schools, banning children from public gatherings.
It was chaos, a lot of confusion.
It's broke me to a million pieces. Hi, darling. Hi. Because she's my first child.
We don't know what was killing them.
He's trying now to play down his role in Samoa. That's not what the parents say.
From my standpoint, should rot in hell for this.
His presence in Samoa was significant for the anti-vaxxers.
Measles cases here in the U.S. are at their highest in 3 decades.
It's a big problem, and it's a very concerning problem.
You will be shocked. I know a whole lot more people whose children are partially vaccinated or completely unvaccinated.
The Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the U.S. has reported nearly 1,300 cases.
I mean, from my point of view, I just want to protect your child.
Why should people in Georgia, the United States, care what happened in Samoa?
Because it could happen here. It could very much happen here.
Welcome back. The 2026 midterm elections are a little more than a year away. Georgia voters will select a new governor, a U.S. senator, along with every seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. And in Atlanta, there's a mayor's race. Candidates in the race for the governor's mansion are already fighting for your votes. This past week, President Trump endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones for governor, and setting the stage for Jones to be the frontrunner in the race as a GOP. Jones is battling Attorney General Chris Carr for the Republican nomination, and Carr is arguing that he is better positioned than Jones to win in a general election. And his first line of attack is over money. Carr has been criticizing Jones's fundraising efforts on social media. He's even filed a federal lawsuit. He's asking a judge to cut off Jones's ability to spend money from his so-called leadership committee. That's a special rule allowing legislative leaders to raise unlimited funds. And as a sitting attorney general, Carr can't do that. And our panel joins us once again. So Doug, the Trump endorsement for Jones, not really a surprise.
That will probably be the least surprising thing that we see in this gubernatorial race. You know, any Trump rally that you went to in the 2024 election cycle, Jones was there, not just there, but a lot of times he would get up on stage and really cheerlead for the president. And they are very tight-knit. Jones has been to the White House. And as you mentioned, he has the fundraising advantage. Trump doesn't like to pick losing candidates. And a lot of times in Georgia, he doesn't. And so not only through that leadership pact, but Jones also has the ability and has already loaned himself money out of his own personal finances. So no, not surprising at all. And I suspect that that endorsement will hold throughout the cycle.
Jason, you've been around Republican politics for a long time. How do you see this playing out?
Well, kind of the surprise is it's a little early, but then if we really think about it, we are actually starting to get a little bit late in the cycle. I can remember back in the last time we had an open seat for governor, Brian Kemp announced early April of the year before the election. So here we are in August, and we still don't know if the field's been completely set. Georgians typically do not necessarily vote on how people from outside the state endorse. I've seen this over and over. It may help you win a Republican primary, but doesn't always. And it's also a bit of a double-edged sword. We don't know what the president's approval ratings are going to be in Georgia once we have the primary next year. And at that point, the endorsement's old news.
So Zelda, as a Democrat, as you watch the Republicans sort of figure out who's going to be their nominee, even though the Democrats don't have a nominee yet, who do you think would be the easier Republican candidate for the Democrat to go up against?
I would say Burt Jones. Burt Jones was a strong supporter of Trump. He believed that Trump won the election in Georgia. He fought against the election results where Fannie and Willens had to tell him to stop. So Burt Jones would be the candidate that we would tear down. So yes.
All right. Well, speaking of the Democrats, Doug, you got to speak with one of the newly declared Democratic candidates for governor.
Yeah, Mike Thurmond. He is fairly well known in the metro Atlanta area, not only because he was the CEO of DeKalb County for a very long time, but also because he served as labor commissioner. Interesting factoid about that, he was the last Democrat to serve in a constitutionally elected role, and really is the only one with that kind of executive level experience at the state level. And so we got a chance to sit down with him and ask him about his new candidacy this week. Michael Thurmond, thank you for joining us today. So the field of Democratic candidates is obviously growing at a very rapid pace at this point, still a year out. Ultimately, what was it for you that made the decision for you to jump into this race?
My love for the state of Georgia and for the millions of Georgians who call Georgia home. This is the place where we live, work, and play. And after having traveled around Georgia, I heard directly from Georgia citizens and residents. They expressed to me their concerns, their fears, and their hopes and aspirations for this state, and made it very clear that they wanted a candidate, they wanted candidates in this race who are willing to put aside the hyper-partisan politics, to focus on the kitchen table issues about paying for groceries, rent, mortgages, having access to health care, and creating better schools for our children.
I think people want Democrats to be more aggressive, especially in Georgia, where there's so much room for them to do that. But, you know, where else can you look to make a difference besides that attack of just really opposing anything that Donald Trump and Republicans do? How can you move things forward?
It's not who you're fighting against. The real question is, who are you? Do you have the courage to fight for? Who are you fighting for? I will be fighting for families who are struggling to pay the rent. I will be fighting for families who are struggling to put food on the table or get to a hospital. I will be fighting for rural hospitals that are on life support right now all across rural Georgia. I'll be fighting for people and parents and young people in the urban areas where health care is almost non-existent. We have health care deserts in the urban areas. It's not who you fight against, but who you fight for that ultimately results in a positive outcome.
I think a lot of these things all tie back to the funding bill that was passed last month. We've heard a lot of concern from local leaders all the way up to state leaders about how things like healthcare, how things like rural hospitals are going to be funded.
One of the things I found that's some confusion among the population is they believe that the decision that was made on the funding bill, the big, beautiful bill in Washington, was the final word. It's not. The fight is just beginning. Now the fight is transferred to Georgia and the other 49 states. If we have the political will and the concern, not one Georgian who is eligible for Medicaid will lose that benefit. If we have the commitment and the concern and the political will, we can ensure that little children won't go to bed at night suffering from food insecurity because their parents can't pay for food. If we have the political will and the ability to build bridges of cooperation, we can extend Medicaid so that our rural hospitals will remain open.
I'll ask you point blank, if the option's still on the table in 2026, would you expand Medicaid?
I'm going to protect it and expand it.
Some candidates, Burt Jones, for one, has already proposed getting rid of the state income tax. Is that too far for you? Is that something that you would consider?
Well, you have to look at the legislation once it's produced. We have to make sure that we have a progressive tax system so that people who are struggling and working hard don't allow those hard-earned dollars to be siphoned away by an unfair tax system. For instance, there's discussion about doing away with the income tax. if we rely more on the sales tax, then we must take steps, because a sales tax is regressive. And consequently, the burden of that will rest on the shoulders of those who are on the lower end of the economic scale.
Michael Thurmond, I appreciate your time today. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, so Zelda, size this up for us. On the Democratic side, which candidate do you think has the upper hand, and who would be the strongest?
Michael Thurmond, he has a great campaign, and he came up with boots on the ground logo. But I also question his age. We want the candidate to run for re-election. His age is a factor for me. And as for Keisha Lance Bottoms, I would like to see her innovative ideals along with Jason. He came to my church, First Congregational, and spoke at the men's program. But I want the candidate to be a person that everyone can relate to, who could be innovative, who could see healthcare issues that we are struggling with in Georgia, education and property ownership. Where will someone live? Will they have the ability to own a home sooner than later? And will education, going to college or getting a higher education, so on and so forth as secondary, will that be a factor also? Will they see a need for education reform? So up in the air who's going to be the choice for the Democrats, but we have a lot of good candidates. But my key factor is, if you're leaving your seat, do you have a successor? Do you have someone who is going to push forward your ideals, your vision, your mission, and help your constituency that you're leaving? So that's a factor to me as well.
Atlanta News First is your election authority. You can log on to our website to get the latest on all of the 2026 races, or scan the code on your screen to download the free Atlanta News First app and get up-to-the-minute notifications sent directly to your phone. Still to come, President Trump takes crime-fighting efforts into his own hands. Police in Washington, D.C. placed under federal control. Well, right now in our nation's capital, President Trump is working to move homeless people away from Washington, D.C. It's part of his federal takeover of policing in the District of Columbia, where the president says he wants to crack down on crime. Washington, of course, is a congressionally established federal district that gives the president the constitutional authority to do what he's doing, though he has not proposed any policies directed at the root causes of homelessness or crime. And FBI data actually shows that crime in D.C. is down. As for homelessness, a new count for D.C. puts the total homeless population at just over 5,100 adults and children. That's a 9% decrease compared with the year before, according to the D.C. mayor. Atlanta's latest count reveals that our city has just under 2,900 unhoused people. That's a 1% increase from last year. Atlanta leaders have come under fire this year in their efforts to get unhoused people off the streets. Back in January, Cornelius Taylor was killed while crews were clearing out the old Fourth Ward encampment that he was sleeping in. And our panel joins us once again. Atlanta has seen firsthand how complex this issue is. Jason, as you look at it, why is President Trump making this a priority right now?
Friends of mine who live in Washington, D.C., who work in Washington, D.C., are constantly worried about being a victim of crime, and the D.C. Metro Police not doing anything about it. Washington, D.C. is under control of the federal government. It has been since it was created under the U.S. Constitution. And what Democrats are doing right now is they're looking at a bunch of false statistics. You know, Mark Twain said there are two types: there's lies and there's statistics, and to prove the numbers. What they really need to be doing, and President Trump is very smart on this, so we're playing a rope-a-dope. If Trump says the sky is blue, the Democrats are going to say, no, it's green. When they really should be saying here, which this is an 80-20 issue that the president is really focused on with the Democrats. And the Democrats in charge of D.C. government should be saying, yes, we recognize there's a problem, but we don't agree with how President Trump is handling it. We want to work together to make sure we actually bring crime down.
The president's federalization of the D.C. police force came really with a warning to other cities. So as we look at the situation here in Metro Atlanta, Doug, is this something that could happen here?
The short answer is no, and we asked a lot of our legal experts about this, right? The Home Rule Act, Section 740 of the Constitution, could it happen in Atlanta? Because Trump was explicit in his press conference announcing this move that, hey, we have the same problem in New York, Chicago. He said a number of other cities.
He didn't say Atlanta.
He did not say Atlanta, no. But the fact still remains, As Jason said, D.C. is a federal entity in every sense. It is under the jurisdiction, in some cases, of the federal government. There is really nothing Trump could do with just a more traditional metropolitan city because he doesn't have the same type of power that he does over the District of Columbia.
All right. Well, Atlanta News First is digging into all the latest developments from elected leaders in our nation's capital and across Georgia all week long. Subscribe to the On the Record podcast to get political updates right in the palm of your hand. And that is our show. Thanks very much to Zelda Jackson, Jason Shepard for going on the record with us. And Doug, of course, thank you always. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next Sunday.